As the result of thousands of years of cultivating Western and Eastern philosophies, as well as compatible philosophies from every group they could find in the world, everyone basically is part of a subculture derived and based group or grouping that lives by the principles of evil, shallowness, and just complete dishonor. Everyone except me. So this video is about brain structure and functioning, leadership and maintenance, and automatic unconscious behaviors and subconscious mental processes. Automatic unconscious behaviors and subconscious mental processes. According to a 2017 article in sciencemag.org, a group of researchers did a massive study with 2,750 women and 2,466 men using brain scans. They found that men have a bigger total brain volume with a bigger total volume in the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory and spatial awareness, 3D visualizing of nature, etc. In the amygdala, which is responsible for emotions and decision making. In the striatum, which is responsible for learning, inhibition, and reward processing. So think about how this relates to sex and money and culture and respect, right? And cultural advantages and obstacles when it comes to the mainstream white Western culture, so to speak, and how other people are forced into their systems of education, which have been evolved and designed meticulously for generations to favor white people with customs, traditions, norms, and studying mental processes and behaviors and ways of learning. And in the thalamus, which is responsible for processing and relaying sensory information. This is what makes men better martial artists and better leaders as well. Look at the amygdala, emotions and decision making. So they have a more effective brain structure when it comes to dealing with their emotion and making decisions. Women have more, past studies include women having more activity in the white matter of the brain, which is responsible for networking, the networking grid that connects gray matter and other processing centers, which makes it easier for them to multitask, generally speaking. This helps with multitasking, while gray matter helps with focus, and men have more activity within the gray matter. So you look at the differences, right? Women have less variation when it comes to their brain structures, generally speaking. This is why the more conformist, groupie sex, they relate to each other more, and men have to vie for the affections of women that are very similar to each other, whereas women have to deal with men who are very different, and they don't have the focus and the ability to deal with their emotions effectively, especially when you couple that with menstruation, the period, expression, and that's a play on words, right? Men, stray, shun. The stray from the social norms, they get shunned because women have been conditioned for generations with their brain structure being considered before, during, and after these studies to behave in a way that is consistent with the treachery of the state, which goes back to everyone other than myself is part of a group, right? A political group, a religious group, a civic institution and the resulting groups, okay? A group of friends, a networking group, okay? Or a grouping, right? This type of a person as a result of this culture and this acceptable reaction to this culture, okay? That deals in the principles of cunning. The West has basically told the world that we prefer, in fact, they insist on shallowness, deceit, and cunning, and con man activities as determinants for behavior, instead of the principles of righteousness, faith, and truth as determinants for behavior. And as a result, we truly don't see anybody behaving in a way that is righteous other than myself. They all deal in deceit and half-truths. This is why no one stands with me, and this is why I can effectively oppose them, because it takes a group of people, okay, to work and organize effectively. and not the problem solution groups they have that are, all the groups we see as solution groups in society are major parts of the problem. For example, Black Lives Matter, creating this unfocused, aggressive environment so they can bring in the solution later of gender neutrality and attacking testosterone and manhood and masculinity. Another way to look at it is, who's to blame for the rape culture? Is it the alpha male, or is it the beta male, to assign blame to the alpha male in a similar way that Hitler assigned blame to the Jews? So who was more to blame for the rape culture in Europe before World War II? Of course, it was the internationalists who took advantage of the poverty and the social circumstances of Germany after World War I. Okay, it wasn't a bunch of alpha males insisting that they all prostitute themselves. It was the beta males and the sex cult and the sexual revolution in Germany that was so appalling and repugnant. And there was pedophilia. There was families prostituting themselves. It wasn't unusual to see a mother and a daughter prostituting themselves. So let's look at, the history of the occult, right? Hidden motives, hidden agendas. We have who Merlin is based on. Merlin, obviously, depicted, and rightfully so, as an effeminate beta male. And he is based on, his real name was probably a rounded off form of Ambrosius. And he never met the hard-bitten Roman British warlord who is remembered now as King Arthur. He's also said to have lived in the 6th century in the Scottish lowlands. Okay, so, it is Merlin, right? Now, where he's an effeminate beta male. And so when we look at this thing, right, where does it start? And even Plato can be seen as a beta male who happened to do wrestling, which really doesn't mean anything, right? There's a lot of gays that wrestle in more than one way, right? And other kinds of beta males. So here we have Pythagoras, 6th century BC, right? He's a beta male. Okay? This is not an alpha male rape culture. The people who designed the culture are beta males. We can flip to any page in this book, okay? Here is Franz Anton Mesmer, where they get hypnosis techniques, right, for illusion. And it goes back to the unconscious mental processes and the unconscious automatic behaviors. So how did I put it? It goes back to the automatic unconscious behaviors and subconscious mental processes, right? Here, a beta male, trying to influence a woman and make her more susceptible and suggestible to the rape culture and ideas that will help maintain the rape culture. We can go through this book. It's one beta male after another. Let's randomly pick a page and watch what happens. Just flip through it and see where we get. Boom, we get Atelia publicizes tarot divination. And look at him carefully. He's a beta male. The whole history of Western culture, psychology, and so on, Freud, Jung, these are beta males. These aren't alpha, aggressive, testosterone-having males. And we look at 1939 when Freud died, as a result of his ideas about mental illness being connected to repressed sexual desire, suppressed sexual desire, we get millions of rapes in World War II and 60 million deaths. It was his arguments about how sex is needed to balance people, which certainly led to comfort women with the Japanese. It certainly led to the Russian rape of Germans and Germans raping people and everyone raping everyone. Okay, certainly they were considering this in terms of morale and how to keep, your military force sane during a very stressful situation. All right, so the female has a more trickery. The female is more capable of trickery in this female gynocentric culture because of how her brain structure relates to the culture. They have shown a willingness to subject themselves to this coerced and tricked sex culture. When we look at it in terms of willpower, and forcible rape is an adverse effect. No, it is a direct consequence of this culture. It is a foreseeable consequence. So what the answer is, the uncommon martial arts, the non-yin-yang, non-Buddhist, non-Indian, non-Western, non-Eastern martial arts, the true African pure sun temple, spirit of truth and righteousness and depth of faith and morality, which should be the determinants of human behavior, not shallowness and complicity with race-based cultures and Western crony capitalism and kleptocracy derived, kleptocrat-derived cultures, plutocrat-derived cultures, murderous, thieving, make-a-killing, white-collar scum-derived cultures, corporate-sponsored cultures. This shouldn't be the determinant of human behavior and what culture you choose. It should be morality, truth, and faith in righteousness. The foundation of feminism is being an accomplice to the tricked into sex culture, rape culture, and using the psychological effects for political gain. Whether you look at it in terms of witches and gypsies, who are the early feminists, right, and the sex cult shamanism, and so on. Or you look at it in terms of Greek societies in college and the rape culture of the Greco-Roman myths, which laid down the foundation for Western culture. The foundation of feminism is irrefutably and unavoidably so these things, found in these things. And also in modern liberalism, classic liberalism, the age of enlightenment, the age of reason in terms of Western reason, pragmatism, and functionalism, which also leads to the lack of morality and more of a consideration, a cultural consideration, mind you, as to how things work. How things work when things are designed by rapists who look up to Poseidon, who was a rapist, Mars, who was a rapist, okay, Zeus or Jupiter, who was a rapist. Okay, this is a rape culture. A bunch of rapists, right? Dionysus, Pan, Bacchus. They use music to put you in a trance-like state and drugs to rape people. It is more of the female perspective to hide behind language and purposely miss the point. And this has to do with the fact that they had a larger brain volume when it comes to the cortices in general. Okay, the cortices. And this has to do with language and perception, which also makes them more vulnerable. Ultimately, what we see playing out, and we know this without any studies, obviously, that they're more susceptible to alcohol, generally speaking, and they're less in touch with when they lose control than men are, which makes it easier for men to start drinking with them. Drink, right? They tend to be a little bit more strong, more body mass. They can drink more, right? Women start losing, the man's like, aha, now it's time for me to take advantage of you. You see how that works? So because of where their bigger total brain volume is, where their bigger brain volume is in their cortices and their overall less brain volume and the lack of an effective structure in regards to the, in their hippocampus, in their amygdala, in their striatum, and in their thalamus especially, which has to do with memory, right? On levels of consciousness, okay? It has to do with the memory and how they interact, right? Decision-making and emotions, learning, inhibition, and reward processing, okay? These things play out differently with the male brain and the female brain in processing and relaying sensory information. They are said in some studies to take in more sensory information, but their inability to process it makes it so. So what? If you can't consciously process it and make the correct conscious decision, and you have all these subconscious processes that have to do with sensory information, you're basically at the mercy of the psychological construct and the social engineers, who are a bunch of beta male teaming up with feminists who leverage the coerced sex culture, the rape culture, the trick culture, and politically and in terms of erotic capital, pussy power, feminine influence in terms of human resources. I suggest you watch this video 2 or 3 times because I don't want to hear a single comment that reflects a lack of understanding. Okay, so I don't want to see or hear anyone comment in this way. Spirit. Remove the T, this feminine suffix, and put it backwards. You get I, rips. Your perspective is ripped. E, rapes. I, ripes. You see when people are ripe, women are ripe, and when they're not. Tear and tear, ops. Psychops, psyche, tear as... Tuesday, right? He's martyr, right? He basically puts his hand in Fenris's mouth so they can chain him up. Form, for, rough, far, fear, fur, roof, and ref. Horus is coming from afar, right? Versus you're in the form of the oppressor in the checkered floor to keep in check, the checkered yin-yang floor, okay? Because of fear. So what is the roof? What is the versus the point of the pyramid? Okay. Embrace, e-brace, ob race, O brace, A break E, A core ba, E break A break A. Coffee, C O fee, cuff E, E O fo C. Caffeine, cuff fo and E, C of fo.